We're recording, we're going live.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us from wherever you are in the world. So this is the 5th of our 6 webinars with speakers live from COP27. So today we're talking about 2 really important issues of climate finance, which Auriane's going to be focusing on, and also action we can all take to stop global warming, which is what Liz is going to be focusing on. So as ever with this, we've got fantastic top speakers, live updates, updated views. So let's start off with an introduction then. So Auriane, would you like to start with a short introduction to yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Sorry for the wind in my hair. So I'm currently at the blue zone of COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. I'm in the main courtyard, which is surrounded by different buildings. And so trying to find some space outside because the connection can be a bit blurry outdoors, or there are so many people from all around the world gathered together. So I'm 24. I work in climate finance. As a day job, I work in renewable energy financial advice within a big bank in London. But I'm at COP on my free time, and it's my first COP ever, so I wanted to learn how it is. I've been engaged in the climate actions for years now, and I'm also helping building a climate positive investing alliance along with friends and investors, NGOs from all around the world. So on a voluntary basis, the idea being to gather a network of motivated people to share resources and encourage more and more climate investing. So happy to touch more upon that later, but delighted to be with you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Auriane. So I certainly want to join your team here, and I hope other people will want to as well. So well done for finding a good place to speak, because I know it's been a challenge with other speakers. So well done. We can hear you perfectly, and the picture's perfect as well. So you're picture perfect. So Liz, would you like to introduce yourself? And we hope you'll be picture perfect and sound perfect, because you're in the UK.
Yeah. So hi everyone, I'm Miss Christou. I've written a book called Spend Green and Save the World, Tackling Climate Change Through the Consumer-Led Movement. So I am a process improvement practitioner as my day job. And basically that means tackling big problems with certain ways of doing things using lean, actually, which is used by lots of businesses all over the world to improve things. And I've applied all that methodology to how we can actually take action to make it easy for us to take action and to get to the root cause of the problem, to make sure we're taking the right actions as well. And so that's what the book is all about. It's very practical, but it's also about how we can actually take action realistically in our busy lives, as with our consumer hats on.
Well, congratulations as always on your book. I think Gary's written the book, but there's not many of us here who've written a book. So look, over to Auriane to start. So climate finance, such a critical subject, so much seems to be held up because of finance. Do you want to just give us an overview of what you're seeing happening at COP27 on finance?
Sure. So just the spoilers, I'm not part of the party's delegation, so I was not in all of the discussions and everything. But so generally, to give you an overview, so climate finance is types of funding, whether at regional, national, and international level, that supports actions that tackle climate change. So it has been split into 2 main part of things, which are mitigation and adaptation. So in Copenhagen in 2009, so at COP15, the developed nations agreed to by 2020 fund $100 billion per year to developing nations to help them with both mitigation and adaptation. This had been an issue discussed at this COP because so in 2022, reports for 2020 agreed on the number of around $83 billion being committed, which is not that far from 100, but still not 100. So it's definitely being discussed on how we can reach this target of 100 billion. This year also on the agenda for the first time has been added the loss and damages topic, which basically are, so mitigation is all of the action all of the actions that prevent climate change. So decarbonizing, investing in renewable energy, investing in better sourcing, etc. So to decarbonize, adaptation is, for instance, doing restoration of ecosystems, building dams to prevent storm, etc. So to mitigate, to tackle the effects of climate change. And then the loss and damages is it's not that new topic. It's been discussed since the 19s, but it's getting more and more momentum, especially with the terrible floods in Pakistan and other countries this year. And it's basically the damages that cannot be repaired, that for which mitigation and adaptation are already too late. So it's been on the agenda. Denmark was the first country to commit to that in September, but it's still being litigious, as so I mentioned. The mitigation and adaptation targets are not there yet, so it's difficult in the context of crisis to agree on even more financing for a different topic.
Okay, so great. Thanks for that really clear introduction to the two aspects of mitigation and adaptation. Let's just talk a little bit about the $100 billion, because this has been in the news for so long. So do you think, from talking with people at COP, do you think there's a feeling this year that the $100 billion is going to be achieved, or are we going to go away at the end of this COP still with a shortfall of 10 or $17 billion on this amount of money? What are your thoughts, Auriane?
It's still difficult to tell, as it's an issue among many others that are still being discussed. I think the feeling of people is that yes, developed countries want to do more, and so I'm not political, so I won't extend, but recent political evolutions are in the US also have been bringing enthusiasm around climate here, but yeah, in the other mitigants is the crisis that developed countries are facing, and so yes, I think it will increase, but I won't be able to tell you when the 100 billion targets will be reached.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm not sure someone can really do an estimate, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, I think to put it into context, we know that certain countries like the US has been spending hundreds of billions of dollars on the situation in Ukraine. But in terms of climate, we've still got this situation where there seems to be a gap. But let's talk about loss and damage, because this is a subject that a lot of people, I think, have not really understood. The example you gave of Pakistan is really big, because a very poor country has had massive damage from the floods, which have put a third of the country underwater. And that's something that clearly they could not afford to deal with themselves. But in terms of loss and damage, the numbers that I've seen talked about, we seem to be talking about hundreds of millions of dollars rather than billions, whereas one could imagine that dealing with a situation, to adapt in Pakistan could cost a huge amount of money. So what are your thoughts on what amount of money might we see for loss and damage coming out of COP27?
Sure. So as I mentioned, Denmark in September announced that it will fund if we allocate fund for loss and damages. It's so the equivalent of $13 million, depending on the currency evolution. But so we are talking millions, not billions.
We're talking just millions, yeah. Okay.
Exactly. Well, why the damages are estimated, I think, it's around 500 billion. And even to discuss and to approve the concept of loss and damages already brings a lot of debates here. So I'm not sure there will be a number agreed. A first step would be, so it was a very great step to have it on the agenda, but then finding a common definition and who is paying for that. A lot of developed countries are also saying, developing nations are not the only ones facing loss and damages, developed countries as well.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, NGOs like Greenpeace and developing nations have been criticizing the developed nations for saying, you're just blocking the negotiation on that, and we're not making the progress that we would like to make. So still something to follow, unfortunately.
Okay, look, let's bring in Liz to talk about these. These are finance questions, Liz, but you've got the closest understanding of consumers. There's been a lot of discussion in the UK over years about this $100 billion. The loss and damage probably has been in the UK press for less time. So what do you think? How do people on the street see this? How do consumers see this? Given everything going on, are consumers willing to for our government to chip in? Is there an expectation that other governments like the US will chip in to help with these problems, or are we just still going to walk away with acknowledgement of a problem, but not a real solution? What are your thoughts, Liz?
Oh God, that's a big one. I think probably people, even within their own heads, have opposing views, because I think, it all comes down to the kind of root cause of the problem, which I would go one deeper than it being the system. I would say it's all comes from our brains, right? Initially, that's where the systems come from. And within our brains, we've got the part of it that thinks, I want more money, I want more stuff, I want it for me. Our kind of lower thinking animalistic brain. And then we've got a higher thinking human brain that actually says, no, do you know what? Everyone's equal, everyone deserves to be looked after. We all deserve to have a comfortable life and live in a world where we're not under the threat of climate change. So I think there's that going on, probably even within our own heads, within everybody's heads. It's a massive question, but I think we do need to start tackling the root cause, which is us being stuck in this sort of loop of buying more and wanting to make more profit, and not thinking with our higher brains about actually how can we come together as one world and all look after each other, because ultimately that's how we're going to survive and thrive. So yeah, it's a big one, but we need to tackle the root cause, is my take on that.
So we need to come together as one world. What an amazing answer, Liz. I'm so impressed. Fantastic. So let's come back to Auriane. So the Guardian says that developing countries need about $2 trillion a year of climate finance. So, I mean, this is a monster amount of money. We're struggling in the UK to raise money for the government to spend on what it needs. Can you just talk through a little bit to help people of this 2 trillion massive amount of money? How much really do you think needs to come from the governments as pump priming money to make things happen? And with the right structure, how much can be provided by private finance? So, I mean, to take an example, electric vehicles, we've got amazing electric vehicles on the streets. Okay, some of them are quite expensive, but the development of that has mainly been paid for by the companies themselves. So can you give us an idea, Auriane, of this $2 trillion, how much has we as taxpayers got to pay for, and how much is going to come from these wonderful investors who are going to help out the world?
Sure. So maybe to start, so again, I made the separation between mitigation and adaptation. The private sector, as you mentioned, for instance, with electric vehicles, but also renewable energy and all of these sectors that are financially viable and that you can, let's say, split into different revenue streams are being mostly funded via private finance. Now that there are a bit more mature technologies and can be sustainably can be viable, economically sustainable on their own. For instance, so let's take the green bond market, which has reached more than $2 trillion as of the third quarter of this year, and is expected to grow to $5 trillion by 2025. So this is a huge amount of capital being catalyzed into climate finance. That being said, for adaptation, the private sector has been, it is estimated that it has funded less than 2% of adaptation finance. So I think the split between these two categories is important. And I mean, some explanation can be done, can be just because adaptation are usually big infrastructure financing that are at the city or at the regional level, and that are difficult to implement on the private sector on its own. Now this year, and I mean it's not a new topic, but this year it's been discussed a lot, at least from what I've seen in the panels, is first nature-based solutions, which is a big part of adaptation, which is gaining momentum with the carbon markets, and for good or for bad, but at least the fact that it's growing and getting more momentum and getting more segmentation for regulation and everything is good. And also public-private partnerships, which has been, so basically bringing both private finance, so as you mentioned, from investors, which are aiming for a target, for a return. And I mean, it's not for the return on its own, but what is important to understand is that behind the ultimate investors are like insurance, pension funds, and it's for your pension. You want your pension to thrive, so sure. It's a requirement on its own to guarantee the pensions of people through these investments. So the returns are not are necessary. On the other hand, you have philanthropic money coming from NGOs or governments. And you have also just cities or governments doing financing. So this public-private partnerships can take several forms. One of them is what we call blended finance, when you have different steps and different level of returns, and also, for instance, the World Bank and the ECB have implemented some things called guarantees for loans, for instance, for investors for more risky investments that catalyze private money, which is much bigger, as we mentioned, but then also less willing to take risk, and at some point to be able to bring it to projects that are not financially viable on their own or most risky, but being guaranteed by the state or being layered into different categories of risk is super important.
Okay.
So yeah, I hope I answered the question. It was a long answer.
No, that's great. So we'll come to Liz in a minute. Thanks Auriane for that explanation of around how basically for mitigation there's a lot of money available from climate green bonds, etc. But how for adaptation, then obviously there's not the returns, and hence why that needs government money. So thank you for that explanation. So as I say, we'll come to Liz just in a minute. But before we leave the finance segment, Auriane, you mentioned the question of nature-based solutions. So obviously the nature-based solutions are around things like carbon credits, which I'm interested in myself for the trees. that with the carbon credits, do you see the real potential here for developed countries buying the carbon credits and hence supporting investment in planting more trees in places like Brazil, Congo, etc.? Do you see this really going to happen and take off in a big way, Auriane?
Absolutely. The carbon markets that have been implemented in many regulation have encouraged the companies. I mean, they're forced to buy carbon credits, and which has developed a lot of different projects of reforestation or just restoration. Here in Egypt, not that far from Sharm el-Sheikh, are a lot of mangroves, and the UNESCO is hosting a pavilion where they talk a lot about mangroves restoration, which are basically, for those who don't know them, little trees in the water, just capturing tons of carbon. So yes, it's definitely a great push. Of course, many actors have been saying, be careful, there needs to be additionality. We need to make sure that it's not just planting trees for planting trees, and sometimes it can even be even more harmful than the carbon it's capturing. So yes, people are saying, be careful, but at the same time, yes, it's a great thing to encourage investments as long as there are more and more regulations. This morning, a woman at the panels was saying she was working for soil reforestation organization in Kenya, and the problem that they had was that they were compelled to send their samples to either Ohio or Germany from Kenya to be able to have their carbon credits approved. So there are still a lot of things to do to make sure that the system is more appropriate, and to make sure that there is not a lot of brainwashing there. But yeah, it's definitely
Super.
Pushing for the better.
Great, thanks for that, and thanks for that information that there's actually mangroves being planted near to Sharm el-Sheikh. So that's completely new to me. Okay, so look, over to Liz. Liz, do you want to tell us a bit about, first of all, your book that you've written on for the consumers?
Sure, yeah. So it's called Spend Green and Save the World, and it's very practical in terms of what you can do. I think a couple of key things about it that perhaps aren't in other similar books are that, one, like I said before, I bring my process improvement methodology very much into the book, into how we can, one, sort of tackle the root cause, make sure we understand that it's within our brain, you know, the sort of two things going on in our brain. There's the higher thinking brain, there's the lower thinking brain, and we're sort of trapped in the lower thinking brain in this system, and that is what's driving our sort of greed and selfishness that the system feeds, and vice versa. So how we can sort of break out of that by understanding it, and then it tackles how we can make improvements in our lives quite easily by using continuous improvement, so bit by bit changes, rather than sort of thinking, oh, I need to radically change my life, and that's all a bit scary and I don't want to do it. So yeah, and also the other focus is that it's about well-being improvement as well. So I think lots of people might think, oh, it's a bit scary to have to change, and what am I sacrificing, what am I going to lose? But actually, in my experience, and what hopefully I've demonstrated in the book, that it can massively increase your well-being by making some of these changes, by focusing more on you know, nature, by focusing more on time with friends, by focusing more on how we can support business and organizations to actually care and actually give back, rather than just going to, you know, big corps all the time, can actually improve our well-being physically, emotionally. So yeah, there's quite a lot in there.
Yeah, wow, that's a really great introduction, Liz. Thank you so much for that. I mean, this point about gratitude for what we have, rather than always striding for more, is such an important point. I mean, it's resonating, I think, with an increasing number of people. But obviously, there's people who for this is really a new concept. So thanks for introducing that. So let's talk a little bit about COP27. I mean, Auriane's given just some great introductions to the finance side, and clearly the takeaway from people here is that there maybe is a lot of complexity, and COP27 seems really quite remote. So what's your take on this? Really, what do you see for the consumers that you're representing here? What do you see as COP27 meaning for us?
So I suppose I find it a bit risky that people can or might think that, oh, it's all being sorted out at these COP conferences. You know, I don't sort of need to worry, it's all being handled over there. Because I think if that was the case, then it would have happened already. There's been quite a lot of COP conferences, right? So, and we don't seem to be progressing anywhere near the speed we need to. So I think we need to use it as inspiration, because there's loads of great stuff happening on the ground, and thanks so much to you guys for bringing these kind of talks to the forefront of people's attention so that they can see what is going on and what kind of inspirational stuff is happening over there. I've been inspired by it. Some of the ladies you were talking to last week talking about how they can speak to businesses and consult with businesses and help them reduce their emissions, so from small entrepreneurs right up to big corps. So whether you're an employee watching this, whether you're a small entrepreneur watching this, you know, there's stuff like that you think, okay, how can that impact what I actually do at home? So I think we need to use it as inspiration, but not think, oh, everything's going to be okay because they're sorting it out at COP.
This is a really great point, Liz. It's so important. I mean, in terms of the context, it was agreed, the Paris Agreement, where limit global temperatures to 1.5 or whatever, was agreed back in 2015. Here we are in 2022. We're still talking about it, and we're still saying, oh, that's fantastic. The G20 this week in Bali has agreed to continue to support 1.5. And we're also pleased with this in terms of commitment. But at the end of the day, here we are 7 years on, and if someone was building a complex extension on your house, you'd be absolutely driven crazy by now if it took anything like 7 years to do something which is, at the end of the day, you know, the professionals should be doing. So great point. It's not being sorted out. So let's go now, Liz, back to you to talk about, well, look, what is your advice to consumers? And then after that, let's come back to Auriane, because you're not just a client, you're not just a climate finance professional, you're a consumer as well. So Liz first, and then back to you, Auriane, to talk about what your comment is, please, for consumers. So Liz, over to you first.
Yeah, well, I loved the point that somebody made last week on one of your webinars that I think lots of other people have made, and that is find what you're all about, find what you're interested in, you know, find your place in this. So that can be both a case of sort of look at your actions as a consumer. So what you buy, what are you into? Are you into clothes? Are you into tech? What are you into? Are you a foodie? You know, and focus on that, because that's where you can start, that you're going to sort of have motivation to start to do something about. So, you know, can I be looking at more plant-based recipes? You know, can I look at companies, if you're into tech, with companies like Fairphone, who actually really care about the environment and also about people. And that's one thing I found as well. Whenever I'm, as a consumer, looking for companies that focus on sustainability, say I do need something new or I need something secondhand, I'm looking for an organization that can provide it. If you find one that cares about sustainability, they often don't just care about sustainability, they care about people, they are caring people, you know, they're not faceless shareholders, they do care. So look for those kind of organizations. And then also, you know, what is it that you as a person are interested in? How can you contribute using your own sort of set of skills? So it might be that, for example, if you're into fashion and you like arranging events, can you arrange a clothes swapping event? Something like that, something that's going to bring you satisfaction, you know, increase your well-being, make you feel good, and help contribute to the climate problem, and quite often, you know, the inequality problem as well. You know, let's give our money to small businesses rather than big ones, or ones that care, you know, ones that care and ones that are doing something about it. Let's support those. So
great points here, Liz. Thank you for that. So closed swap, the shared economy, these sort of things. So Auriane, you're a consumer as well. So what's your comment? What's your advice to consumers?
Sure. And thanks a lot, Liz, for sharing about all of the behavioral science as well. I think it's the first thing, and just making sure that as consumers, we understand our impact and how we can change things. I think the first thing I would advise would be calculate your carbon footprint from a climate perspective. When I calculated mine for the first time, I saw the different things where I was better than average. For instance, so I don't eat any types of meat or fish, and I try to reduce my animal products consumption to the least. So on this side, I did great. But on the other side, I did an exchange semester in the US last year, so I had a big carbon footprint on my flight. So how making sure to understand where your footprint is big, how you can reduce it, how you can also, so Liz was mentioning, if you love fashion, I mean, I won't tell you not to buy fashion, not to buy clothes anymore, but turning more to secondhand or more sustainable brands, or doing renting of clothes and etc. So for me, yes, I love traveling. I try to take the train as much as possible. Sometimes my friend makes fun of me because I spend ages on trains. I pay more. I've been emailing the different elected officials to make sure to subsidize the Eurostar. As I'm French and living in the UK, it's terrible, the hole in my budget that it's creates. So yes, I've been trying to make my traveling more sustainable, and then for when I do need to take the plane, for instance, to go to Egypt, it was a bit difficult to find an alternative way. Then I make sure I fund like restoration projects, at least to, I don't like the word offsetting, but at least to contribute to projects that are helping capturing carbon.
Do you know of any of those, Charles?
Yeah. Sorry?
Do you know of any of those types of organisations?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, just in terms of travel, I was going to say there were some guys who are going to be doing a cycling relay from Glasgow to Egypt. I haven't heard about these, but I guess they should have arrived by now in the second week of COP. But there's still, my comment would be is that there's still a lot of people out there who just don't know your first point, Auriane, about people understanding what their footprint is. There's just so many people out there, I believe, who don't know what's going on, who don't know what their impact is, don't know what their footprint is. And what I would say to people is just keep it really, really simple. We all need to remove part of our carbon footprint. Yes, we've got to cut our CO2 emissions by as much as we can, but there's always going to be parts of our footprint we need to remove. And such an easy and effective way of doing that is to plant trees, which is what we're all about. So these webinars, a series of webinars, are sponsored by No CO2. We're paying Gary and his team to run these for us. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Auriane, for your efforts. But to plant trees is just so easy. And let me give you the data, save you working it out. If you're average and you live in the UK or Europe, then if you have planted 1,750 trees, then those trees will remove the footprint of an average person living in those areas. If you live in the US, Canada, Australia, then you need to have planted 4,000 trees. So don't be too frightened about the costs. Check out the costs on our website. The costs are realistic and you can spread it over a few years. But please think about planting trees to make a real difference. So we're coming to the end now. So let's just get a roundup. So I'm back over to each of you, please. What are really your hopes for coming out of COP27? Liz, start off with Liz. What are your hopes? What's the most important thing you want to see coming out of COP27? And then over to Auriane and Gary, if you'd like to chip in as well. So over to Liz.
Well, I've heard people say that some of the people you've spoken to that are there, that it does feel like things are a bit different this year. It does feel like things are tipping more towards real change, real system change. So I hope that that's true. But there is obviously still the negative that there are lots of fossil fuel lobbyists and people like that there as well. So I suppose I hope that things have changed this year, but mainly I hope that people get inspired to take action themselves, to realise that, you can't point fingers and point blame all the time. You have to realize that we're all in this together. We all need to do our bit. So be part of that, I guess.
Fantastic. Thank you. Auriane, over to you.
Thanks. First, so I hope that all of the people who are here, and not only the governments, but so many people from the civil society, from companies, financing bodies, etc., will find ways to partner together to make this big. This is also what COPs are about. They are not perfect solutions, and they won't solve everything. As Liz said, I mean, it's just governments meeting together. So if we can't just wait for them to solve everything, and they have to agree together. It's not a perfect process, but it's there. It's the best we have until now, and it's also a perfect way for so many people to gather together around a common goal and just create wonderful partnerships. I just read about the IRENA, which is the Agency for Renewable Energy, and IPCC partnership today, and I'm really hoping to see more and more of these, as long as hopefully meaningful agreements. But yes, let's see how it goes on this side.
Great. So partnerships so important. A great article today, report on what on the President-elect Lula of Brazil talking at COP27 yesterday, him talking about the need for partnerships. And I totally agree with that. So for ourselves, no CO2, we're absolutely partnering with businesses to help businesses go net zero, and we can really make a difference there, make it easy, cut out a lot of the complexity that others are adding to this. But let's go over to Gary. Gary, thank you for your support for all these webinars, you and your team. You're in the field today. I can see you're enjoying drinking coffee and sitting in a cafe in Birmingham maybe, but tell us what are your hopes for COP27, Gary?
My hopes is that it stays in people's consciousness. No, COP isn't just for Christmas, if you like. So I'm sitting here in the docks of East London, and I'm looking around, and in this cafe I'm just looking, and there's biodegradable packaging everywhere. There's the straws are paper. I'm seeing all of this, and we're exhibiting at this show, and literally every single stand has some green credential somewhere, which a few years ago you wouldn't have seen this. So, but what we need is probably in second gear, maybe even first, hopefully maybe even in reverse. What we need to do is put things into a faster gear by putting this into people's consciousnness. Social media can do that. Your friends can do that. I'm off to a black tie event, and I chose to wear my blue tuxedo. And I said to my wife, "Look, I've worn this before. Do you think anyone noticed?" And she's into fashion. She said, "Renewable fashion, Gary. It's not about fast fashion anymore." So I hope that COP isn't just for Christmas. I'm hoping that this can stay in people's consciousness, and we can step it up a gear. That would be my wish. So there you go.
Amazing.
Back over to you, sir.
COP is not just for Christmas. I think that's that needs to be that needs to go viral. So rounding off, final words, please, from both of you. Auriane, final words, please.
Thanks a lot for having me. So if you haven't calculated your carbon footprint, please do it now. Don't forget also the impact that your savings, pensions, and vote have. So yeah, and thanks. Let's cross fingers and hope and continue to build partnerships to just create more and more climate action and have more mitigation in order to have less and less needs for adaptation and lessen damages, hopefully.
Thank you so much, Auriane, for joining us, and go for it for your next final 2 days at COP. Make sure you get all that action happening. So thank you for that. Thank you for joining us. Liz, over to you for your final words, please.
Yeah, I love the points that everyone's raising there. You know, partnerships are great, and going out and speaking to other people about what you're doing is great, spreading the word. do whatever you can, basically. And Martin's put a question about, should we take political action as consumers? If you feel inspired to, absolutely do that. Do whatever you can, you know, sign petitions, email your MP if that's what you feel inspired to do. So don't look at COP as something that's just distantly happening over there. Hopefully take it as inspiration and think what you can do today to be part of the change.
Thank you so much.
Having me as well.
Thank you, Liz. Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Auriane. Thanks, Gary. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, our audience. And say, if you would like to take action, plant some trees. Then you've got the URL here, noco2.org. Thank you so much. Now, tomorrow is our final event. It's not going to be the end of COP, because COP's going to carry on almost certainly into Saturday, but tomorrow is our final event, and we'll be getting a wrap up from people as to what people think of what's happened so far. Thank you, everybody.
Charles, we can't leave without saying thank you to you.
Yes.
All the energy that you put into this, all the dedication. This doesn't just happen by luck. Charles, we have to say a big thank you to you and No CO2. If you are going to burn carbon, you might as well offset it. So please go over. Charles has made it super easy to plant trees. And I think the final word is a lot of love to you, Charles, because you really do make a difference. Everyone makes a difference. Thank you all the presenters for coming. We really appreciate that.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
See you
guys.
tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.